part 2 of our interview with Bjo and John Trimble. This is episode 52.
You're listening to 70s Trek with Bob Turner and Kelly Casto, the fan podcast that looks at Star Trek in the 1970s. It was the decade that built a franchise.
They are the couple behind the Save Star Trek campaign, the effort to get the first NASA space shuttle named Enterprise, and the Star Trek Concordance. I'm Bob Turner.
And I'm Kelly Casto. Bjo and John Trimble have had an extraordinary career as leaders of Star Trek fandom. We continue our conversation with them this week.
Before we do that, I just want to remind our listeners that they can get in touch with us at our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/70strek.
And you can send us an email at 70strek@gmail.com. If you just want to find the show on iTunes, search 70s Trek in the podcast section. And if you leave a rating or a review, it'll help others find the show.
Before we get to part 2 of our interview, I just wanted to say what a delight it was to have a chance to talk with Bjo and John Trimble. As I mentioned last week, I first came across Bjo's name in the 1973 book, The World of Star Trek by David Gerrold. For me, she was instantly a legend after I read that. I mean, after all, Kelly, this was the woman who saved Star Trek. So... I mean, I was just tickled to have the chance to talk with her, you know, and it was a little surreal, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, when do you get a chance to talk to a legend? And not only a legend, but one that had such a huge impact on Star Trek and also the Space Shuttle program.
Yeah, pretty impressive. And there was a point, I have to share this with everybody. There was a point during the interview when Kelly texted me and he wrote, "This is freaking awesome." And I have to admit, I felt exactly the same way. And, you know, tell me, listeners, and leave it on our Facebook page as you listen to this, but we got the sense that they might feel a little bit left behind in 2017, that the franchise that they so supported in the 60s and 70s has grown so big that it has forgotten their contributions a bit.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here today, you know, talking 70s Trek with, you know, all our fans. We'd have nothing to talk about, really, past the 2 seasons that Star Trek would have had if it wasn't for them.
2 seasons, right. They never would have saved it for a third.
No, I mean, there wouldn't be syndication, right? I mean, it probably would have been totally forgotten by all of us.
That would have been very sad. So
yes.
As we reflect, we just wanted to come right out and honor their achievements and thank them so much for everything they've done for Star Trek. Why don't we go ahead and listen to part 2?
Absolutely. Not too long ago on our 70s Trek, we talked about the Star Trek Concordance. Can you kind of tell us, in your words, how it came into being and then later evolved?
Oh, well, we were brand new members of a group called the Society for Creative Anachronism, which is a medieval reenactment group. And we would meet at various houses and just be social, you know. And
yeah.
I know that,
by the way, that's really cool. So I'm a geek like that. So
we're still members 50 years later.
Oh, that's neat.
That's awesome.
But because, well, for one thing, for me, it's a place to teach, and I just enjoy that very much. I never got a teacher's degree, but I enjoy doing what I do. So does John, as a matter of fact, but I can get him to do a class. But anyway, I noticed that, you know, Star Trek was always on. It didn't matter where you went. Star Trek was on the TV whenever it, you know, on
when they were there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there was this girl sitting there, and she had a huge stack of 3x5 cards, and she was making notes, just watching the show of everything that happened. And I went over and I got involved in it, and I got, and I said, wow, this could become a book. And Dorothy said, well, she wasn't interested. And I said, no, it really could. And of course, the plethora of books out now proves that, you could write a book about whispering in backstage and people would buy it. So
Yeah, exactly.
then, circle there. Then Dorothy found religion, and a interesting young man at about the same time handed me this huge stack of cards and said, go with it. So meanwhile, I realized we weren't going to get anywhere just watching even the tapes. They were illegal, but they were tapes. And people made those. And watching the tapes over and over again because we weren't going to get all of the details. So I went to Gene, told him what I was doing, and he arranged for me to get scripts. Everything up to the end of the second season, however. That was as far as he went. And then when they moved in Fred Freiberger to be the new producer and kicked Gene upstairs, Freiberger put a stop to the scripts. So it wasn't until third season was over that I could get more of those scripts. And that's why the original fan concordance was
The first two seasons.
First two seasons, and then a third one when I finally got the other script. So, and by the way,
Another thing I ran off in our basement.
Yeah.
and I gathered artwork from various people, bless their heart, who let me use it. And but if you bought a concordance and you were in the area, you had to come and collate your own copy. Because we didn't. We just didn't have the time. We were raising two small children at this time, by the way. And, Laura says the first thing she remembers is just being nose high to a table and helping collate concordances. So, but whatever money we got from it, then I, after costs, would share with Dorothy. And it was on her part, it would be, but I mean, it wasn't very much, so she wasn't interested. And then I lost track of Dorothy. And about that time, Valentine Books wanted to publish the concordance. So,
Why hadn't you gotten the dialogue script for that?
oh my God, the dialogue scripts. Okay, there is. I didn't know this, and something new to me. There's such a thing as a dialogue script, and all it is that somebody has sat down and listened to every episode as it was made, and they make literally just what the dialogue is, who says it, and if there's any noise, then you have loud bangs, scraping sound, whatever, but it was all the sound, and the reason for that is cutting the show for whatever use.
Well, it helps the editors too to piece together the stuff.
Yeah, because you can't always follow the script. The script sometimes mentions something that doesn't happen, or like Spock would have considerable trouble remembering that the Gumato was really supposed to be a Mugato, and so the words just simply got interchanged, and that's okay. He had trouble with mnemonics too, bless his heart. But so this is very important when you're doing some cutting. And so here was this box of these dialogue scripts in the publicity office, and we had arranged for the publicity guy and his two kids to come to our little convention at that time, and so we, he was.
We had an ob on it.
Yeah, and I said, well, what are you doing with these? And he said, well, these just came back from wherever they were, and
Editing.
he says, we're going to toss them. And I said, could you toss them in the trunk of my car? He said, well, I think that could be arranged. And so I grew up with a box of the dialect strips, which was an enormous help with the book. And so it got published, and that a lot of good fun happened there. And then
We've been doing the fan concordance for some time, and we get contacted by Valentine Books.
Yeah.
And they want to do a professional, book of it.
So we went. Basically, that's what happened there, and we had. So we had. I had to, write and get all the artist permission and everything, and we paid them. That was $1 or $2 at most, at best for that. But again, I would, it did very well. And the interesting thing is that at that time, everybody was absolutely convinced that Star Trek fandom would end the minute the third season ended. And because all the rumors were, they're going to do another series, they're going to do a movie, they're going to do another series, they're going to do a movie, And so even though the Concordance was one of the best-selling of the trade edition books, when the first run was sold, they never reprinted it because they were afraid they'd end up with a warehouse full of concordances.
Oh, no kidding.
That was just crazy.
Yeah, well, who knew? And so, that's the whole thing. Who knew? Who could have predicted that 50 some odd years later, we would be talking on the phone about Star Trek?
Right.
Like this.
Yeah, right. I'm holding the Concordance right now.
And
you can hear it.
There you go. And have a new series ready to go. We saw, by the way, an exhibit of the costumes at Comic-Con. And it was not in the actual convention center. It was in a little gallery down the street. But the costumes, oh boy. I mean, all of the Klingons are going to go crazy, for one thing. The costumes are very intricate, but oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
They look like the Klingons suddenly fell into money somewhere along the line. Let's just put it that way. Very intricate.
It sounds like you're excited to see this new form of Star Trek.
We're both really excited
We are
about
really
it.
excited. We hope it's as good as the costumes and what have you make it look.
We have not seen any trailers yet because we don't trust trailers. I mean, if you go
We
by,
did see one.
that little shorty. But honestly, trailers will sometimes give you an extremely bad opinion of a really good movie. I don't know why they pay people to do this, but they do. And
They do.
Hollywood never seems to learn. Huh?
You said
Yep.
something.
Can you hear
I
us?
didn't hear what you said. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So,
Well,
yeah.
let me ask you a question about as the show grew in popularity in the 1970s, was there something that happened along the way that told you definitively, yes, Star Trek is going to come back?
Well,
We got hoping it would come back, and of course there were rumors out of Paramount that they were going to do a new series. As a matter of fact, they commissioned about a dozen scripts for a new series, and then Paramount changed their mind and decided not to do it. And Gene was after him to either do that or a movie, and he couldn't get his phone calls answered until Star Wars came out and was such a sensation. So the president of Paramount got a phone call from on high, literally on high, the chairman of Gulf and Western was the corporate jet somewhere, and said, "This Star Wars thing is big. don't we own something like that? And suddenly Jim could get his phone calls answered.
Paramount never understood, still doesn't, what they had. We're hoping that CBS does understand, and we got to talk to a bunch of guys at both Comic-Con last year and the Vegas Star Trek Convention, to which we were invited because it was the 50th year. We will probably never be invited again, but okay, that's another story. And, you know, they all talked like they really knew what they were doing. And so we have high hopes for that.
We all do.
Yeah. Yeah. Fingers crossed all over the United States.
That's right.
So, yeah.
I know you were raising your family in the 1970s, but I'm guessing you probably attended a few conventions also. Do you have any favorite memories?
Actually, the very first was the one in New York, which was, couldn't even tell you the date because I'm dyscalcular and I can't count it. Whatever. Anyway, you can look it up. We were both invited, but again,
my job made it so I couldn't go.
And so I went, and they were really on a budget because they honestly didn't know if this thing was going to work at all. And so I ended up in a very large room that had about 6 beds in it. We were a dorm, a girls' dorm in there. We were all grown-ups, and we're all sitting there giggling our way through the night. And we kept saying, okay, time to sleep, right, time to sleep. And everybody started again, you know. So it was loads of fun. And Isaac Asimov was there because he was a big Star Trek fan. All of the actors were there. Gene was there. And this is where I met a person who became a friend till the end of her life, Shirley Mayevsky. She was there to see that her daughter or granddaughter, I've forgotten which. Daughter.
Who was a Star Trek fan.
Yeah. And she wanted to come to this convention, but Shirley didn't want to let her come with all these possible crazies without seeing who they were. So she's very pleased to meet me because we're approximately the same age, and she had somebody to talk to. And we're standing in the hall, and she said, I don't even like Star Trek. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, you don't have to like Star Trek. Do you like any science fiction at all? And she said, yes, my favorite author is Isaac Asimov. At that time, I was passing across a crossway of the hall, and I signed, and I yelled, Ike! And he comes trundling over to us. He was a big old bear of a man. And I said, I want you to meet Shirley Mayevsky. She is a big Isaac Asimov fan. At which point, without a word, he grabbed her, bent her over backwards, gave her a great big kiss, sat her up again and said, thank you, ma'am, kissed her hand, and off he went. And I said, so you see, all the crazies aren't just a bunch of little kids running around, you know, screaming, Spock, Spock, like a bunch of demented flamingos. That's grown-up students too. So anyway, as it happened, then she went back, took a good look at Star Trek, decided it had something for her, and worked in Star Trek fandom, helping the Star Trek Well Committee.
Star Trek Well Committee for many years.
And, helping to acclimate young fans to fandom, where to find fan clubs, where to find various things. She just was a wonderful person, and we just loved her. And
That's
was
neat.
Huge loss. Yeah. Getting sentimental here.
It's awesome.
So, yeah.
The fact that conventions were a hit, and they were all from my fans at the time before the greedy people got a hold of it, made it appropriate. So, but that kind of told us that there was, a real live active fandom here, and that they was going to continue, and that the ratings for the reruns were much greater than the ratings for the show had been. Was about.
Right. No, and by the way, the Nielsen ratings were a lie. But the thing is that about this time I discovered that they had been editing film. No, it was earlier. They'd been editing film and, of course, throwing away the cutting. And so I asked Gene if I could have some, and he told the editor that I could have some, and he just picked up a huge handful out of the bag and handed it to me, and I put it in a plastic bag, and I went to a convention, a little Westercon here in LA that had a huge Star Trek program to it, and I'm talking about about Star Trek, and I showed a film clip which was about 3 feet long, and I said, I'm willing to share some of these with you, but does anybody have any scissors? And about 15 pairs of scissors showed up. I had no idea fandom that was on. So I just handed out the clips, and I said, look, cut up the clips, and then
let's cut them at the frame.
And trade with each other. So here you go. And somebody said, we really should pay for these. And I said, well, there's always a charity we can give something to. So if you'd like to do that, well then, come up here and hand John the money. And
that's very nice.
What happened. And we've done it ever since. And people go, well, where's your big Star Trek collection? Well, it's in New Zealand and Australia,
all over the U.S.,
Germany, and all over the U.S.
Yeah.
They all go out to fan charities. And,
that's nice.
why not? John and I are in our 80s. What are we going to do with the collection? Our kids enjoy Star Trek. They enjoy Star Wars, or they enjoy, like we do, all of the science fiction stuff. But the thing is, we don't need a big collection. Right now, I've got my big piece of gold platinum, but that was given to me by Armin Shimmerman, so I'm going to keep that one.
Yeah,
but
probably
we
should.
have,
Yeah, you probably should keep that one.
Yeah, I guess I. But by and large, we don't keep much around, and that's good too.
Well,
It lets it out in other people's hands, and they're happy.
yeah. Yep. Makes them happy.
Yeah.
So,
And raises some money for charity.
well, and that's the best part.
And that was something very special, by the way. Fans kind of spontaneously started charity, having a charitable fund for their conventions. And it was sort of based on the Harlan Ellison story, where Kirk says to the Keeler, the 3 most valuable words in the galaxy are not "I love you," but "let me help."
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm just there.
You feel, and frankly, that is what basically started things. Gene was very pleased to know that fans were doing that. By the way, he kept an eye on fandom. Believe it or not, he really felt that the fans were very valuable to him and very valuable to the show, which is kind of unusual from the way other shows are. Have we lost you?
We're still here. We're hearing some static.
Oh, well, I don't know. What's the weather like out there?
We got some sirens going by. Sorry.
Oh well,
Okay, we'll just wait a sec.
And we have a couple of sunspots. So
That could be.
Yes, we do.
yeah. But you say, do you have any favorite memories from those conventions? Oh my gosh! I mean,
Well, that was one.
we couldn't tell you all of our memories from that conventions. There's too many. There's too, it just it would take up all of your time. It would take several weeks.
But let me put it this way: we didn't make a dime off Star Trek.
Oh yeah, I don't care what her solo said.
I'd love a little piece of the action, just a minuscule.
How about 1% of 1% would just do us fine.
However, it has produced a richness beyond any money we could have gotten. We have been introduced to Star Trek fans from all over the world. Some have come here, but we've been invited to conventions all over the U.S. and Canada, to Australia and New Zealand,
Germany,
to Germany,
England,
to England,
Ireland.
I mean,
Canada. And we really, and the thing is that it sounds kind of soppy to say, and we've made so many friends this way, but it really is true.
Yeah.
I mean, we value those people, even if we're not really all that good at, keeping good contact with them. But the Star Trek has given us a lot. If it's not in cash, it's at least
even before last year, which was a real bonanza.
Yeah.
Got invited to a little convention in San Diego that did a Star Trek theme that year. We got invited to this. Yeah. Because we've done some earlier work for them, and they did a special Star Trek program for last year. We got invited to Smithsonian.
Yeah, we were guests along with Eugene Roddenberry and his wife to
the Smithsonian. They were going to do an airing of showing the Man Trap at exactly 8:30 on September 8th, which of course is
neat.
Except that they showed the HD. Yeah, they showed the HD one in the IMAX theater. I'm telling you, watching Star Trek.
Oh, an IMAX screen is incredible.
So amazing.
We were invited to show up the day before the event officially opened with some Instagrammers, an Insta-meet, as it were. And we were there to see the Enterprise model lit up.
That was so cool.
The restoration.
And got to talk to the Insta people, and then they were let in early. And then we walked a couple of blocks down the street, all of us, about four of us, and had a Starbucks, I guess, and sat around in the cold wind and talked Trek. And some friends from the USS Starling, which is the club we belong to, came up from the south, wherever they lived, and met us there. And so we introduced everybody to everybody. It was just a lot of fun. And
that sounds like a great time.
Yeah, and of course, every time we went back, here was this beautiful, beautiful Enterprise. They had really, really done a lot of work with it. And so they would ask us if we'd stand around and talk about Star Trek. Well, hello.
Shut us up.
Yeah. And, I'm standing there at one point, and this was at the reception, and I said, they had the movie and then a nice reception, and I said, Matt Jeffries would be very proud to see this. And a young lady standing next to me said, I think so too. And I said, did you know Matt? And she looked at me and she said, I'm Matt's niece.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. No kidding.
And it was one of these, oh my God. So we stood around and talked about Matt, because one of the things that a lot of fans don't know about Matt is that he was an avid small plane flyer. He actually put them together. When he died, he and his brother were putting together a Ford Trimotor.
Yeah, and the restoration and getting it airworthy.
Yeah, and he also was an artist who painted airplanes. He would go to these big airplane meets, and he would paint people's airplanes for them. Not on the plane, I mean a picture of it.
Right.
And and he had this huge collection in his office over at
MGM.
At MGM, where he was the set decorator for
Little House
on Prairie. Yeah.
Right.
And so we met him there one day with a avid Star Trek fan and her husband, who was, it turns out, a big flight fan. And he walked in, saw all these great pictures, and all they did was stand around and talk about airplanes.
So we took the wife and wandered around MGM for a while.
Oh, I mean, we had a visitor's pass. Hey, never miss a chance, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
Right,
it's
right.
like the family is like this. If there's a door that's open, go in.
You never know.
I like that.
Yeah,
You never know. Yeah,
yeah. As long as there's not a red light on, hey, you know.
exactly.
We've seen a lot of people, including guards who come and go. Are you supposed to be here? Well, I don't know. Where does this visitor's badge take me? You know, and sometimes they'll say no, you know, and take you out again. But hey, sometimes you get to wander around and see really interesting stuff.
And you know, if you carry a clipboard, almost nobody asks you that.
Seriously, that used to be the secret of getting on a lot. For me, you would wear little button earrings and a serious looking dress with a sweater, and carry a clipboard. And all you do is walk up to the front gate, and you would go, "I'm here to check on the phone lines into stage 17," and they would, "Oh, right over here, turn left," you know, and you're on.
Just look
And
like
after
you
that,
belong there.
Yeah, exactly. And since
Jeez.
you know how to act on a set, which a lot of people don't, then, you know, nobody wanted it.
Hey,
Until somebody would walk by and say, "Hey, Bjo." And then, of course, everybody go, "Who's that?" And, you know, we're often.
so I have one last question for you. So you appeared in Bjo, you appeared in the big crew briefing scene in the motion picture.
Right.
So how did you get there, and what was that like?
All right. I'll tell you, Gene is one of the best wranglers in the world. So Robert Wise, who is the director, said, "You know, you keep talking about 400 and some odd people, and you never see all of them." Well, in the early days, of course, you couldn't afford that many extras walking around loose. And so he said, "I'd like to do a rec deck and have all of them there, except the ones, of course, out, you know, starting the ship and what have you, and getting it ready to pull out."
Cranking the thing on the motor, you know. And stuff.
Well, yeah, okay. So anyway, so Gene went to the Screen. It was two different things: Screen Extras Guild and Screen Actors Guild. That's now combined, but Screen Extras Guild, and said, "I'd like to go on the street with about half of the actors I have cast." Well, this was allowable in those days because you couldn't always find that as many people in the guild itself that fit your criteria. So they agreed on, I think, a little less than half of the people that could, you know, be, cast from on the street, it's called. So Gene, I love this. I got a call from his secretary saying, "Bjo, do you know anybody who'd like to be in the new movie?" And it was one of these, "Is this a trick question?" Yeah. So they said, "Well, you know, we only want people from California and from LA area because Gene doesn't want people flying in and then being disappointed because they weren't cast, and because it's going to be a real casting call. And, you know, but there's going to be a few of you who will automatically be in the movie." So, and John would have been in too, but again, job. Okay, so.
Darn it, John.
I know, but somebody had to bring them up.
Yeah.
I know.
understand.
And so, but the casting, they set up bleachers, and
Oh, wait a minute.
huh?
They called back about.
Oh, right. I'm
now,
sorry.
They already called a bunch of people, and they called back, in an hour or so, and said, "Oh, by the way, they're going to pay you. There's money in it. They'll pay you scale."
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So I phoned everybody again, and I said, "Hey, there's money involved." And the one fan says, "How much?" And I said, "Well, about $75 for the day." And he said, "Well, I think I could raise that much." I said, No, not you pay them. They'll pay you. So,
It's a good chance to make some
I said, "Oh, well, okay." they did the casting, and as they say, they put up the bleachers, just like they would do for an ordinary cattle call. And about 350 fans showed up. Like, oh, God. And, of course, they were not just in California. You know that. People told people who told people. Right. And so they would bring people down in groups of 20. And, by the way, they had sent Gene out for dinner because they knew that Gene, being the soft-hearted person he was about fans, would say, listen, you really need to cast this person. Yes, I know they won't fit the uniform and they're, and they look weird and whatever, but no, please cast it, that type of thing. So they didn't want to deal with that. So the casting was the casting director and Robert Wise and the costumer and the makeup artist. And they're walking down rows and it would just be like, yes, yes, no, yes, no, 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 yes, no, and if they said no, you were done. Well, if you were a real extra, then you'd have just gone home. But instead, fans went back up in the stands to cheer on their friends, which totally discombobulated the movie people, because who does that, right? Fans do that. So, it's that kind of craziness. So, as I say, they'd already picked several other people, like, David Gerald and, people like that. And, of course, Mrs. Robert Wise. So, comes the day, 4 a.m. This is really ugly o'clock. That, a whole bunch of totally sleepy-headed people arrived, including our Vulcan. Okay, we had one girl who showed up, an avid Star Trek fan, avid Vulcan fan. And they chose her. They said, you can be a Vulcan. And she's walking around going, I'm a Vulcan. Then, the day after this, she phones me and she says, Bjo, I can't go. I'll die on the stage. I'll do something embarrassing. And I said, you better show up. They cast you. If you don't show up, I'm going to tell the rest of fandom, and they will kill you the first thing. So you're going to show up. So she showed up. So, isn't that terrible?
No, you did her a big favor.
Yeah, I was going to say, people need a little encouragement, right? So anyway,
that's right.
She got there, and I didn't even introduce them. She's standing in the front row with Mrs. Robert Wise, and she was so scared. And she got her little ears on, and she just ears all get out. And she's so scared, she can't move. And Mrs. Robert Wise took her by the hand, and she said, you hold my hand. We'll do it together.
Oh, that's nice.
Bless her heart. Our girl managed to get all the way through the day. The day, by the way, went to 11 o'clock that night. But anyway. So, yeah, we got
Did it feel like a long day? Did it feel like a long day for you?
Yes, of course. I mean, when they broke for something, a lot of times, well, it's not going to take a minute, so you guys stay where you are. And so we'd be where we were, but the main actors, of course, would walk off, and their doubles would come up and stand while they were, readjusting the lighting or something. So by the time we got to lunch, I mean, my feet hurt clear up to my hat rim. And the costumes were all made, head to toe, of the tough, stretchy material they make ski pants out of. So you felt like if you bent over a little bit, you would snap clothes. Because... And so, of course, they were hot in blazes. Zippers went all the way down the back. And so if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to invite 2 or 3 other people to come along and zip you up. And because the costumes, except for mine, fit very tightly, you had to have somebody hold the zipper closed while they did the zipping up. And, we... when David was saying, hey, I have to go potty. Well, somebody come and unzip me, and 3 girls volunteered, and I thought, oh, honey, no. Not David. I'm not giving away any secrets. He's come out of the closet now, and it's okay, But anyway, and by the way, David is a dear friend, and we've had a lot of fun with him over the years. So, but it was a long day. It's going to be 2 days because I figured, well, with all these amateurs, hey, it wasn't the fans who had to be told, get away from the phone. You don't need to phone your agent for the next job. Take the racing form out of your uniform. Stop talking. Take your gum out of your mouth. Find your spot again. It was the fans, boy, we were on our spot when they called because we didn't want to be the ones who were responsible for holding up the first movie of Star Trek, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It was the professionals who were doing all of the lollygagging. And so but we also found out that, unfortunately, a lot of the extras were the ones who were helping themselves to stuff because, let's face it, we were being paid $75 a day, and for a very long and grueling day, and they just felt they had to make a little more money, and nobody was really going to use all that stuff anyway. So, and of course, the fans immediately got blamed for it. But and then, by the way, remember all these uniforms? Pale tan, white, gray.
Right.
And so the costume person kept coming by saying, "Don't get this dirty. Don't get this dirty." Okay, fine. So we couldn't even sit down, and there weren't any chairs around. And so they broke for lunch, and they herded us all over to this empty studio stage. Because they didn't want us wandering around the lot and not coming back in time. And they served us lunch. Barbecue chicken.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Spaghetti would have been worse, maybe, but...
yeah, right. But only marginally. We sent each other standing over garbage cans or over tables, because we couldn't risk it. And then, of course, they served up watermelon. And chocolate cupcakes.
Nothing like making it easy on you.
Yeah, really. I was like, okay, then.
Nobody did services.
Right, lots of costumes, yeah. So we get to the end of a normal working day, and the regulars are getting ready to go home. And Mr. Wise says, we've done so well. If we continue shooting now, we won't have to come back tomorrow.
For the actors and the union people figured, okay, golden time.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to get paid extra. We weren't going to get paid anything extra. And so we slogged through it until, as they say, about 11:30. And... it's just like, oh, and a lot of people headed for the Mexican restaurant across the way. And I said, not even a margarita sounds good to me right now. I just need to go home and sleep for about 3 weeks. But anyway, yeah, this was the adventure of being part of the movie. And it was fun. I wish John had been able to be there. We really enjoyed, those of us who had gotten in on it really enjoyed it very much. And some crazy things happened there. You'll see some rather strange characters, like a couple of aliens that you've never seen before that were actually some fans, the fantasy alien, that kind of thing, that they'd done the makeup themselves. And there was about 5 or 6 Native Americans that had been invited to be there, and they came in full regalia. And so you have a full feathered headdress and a Starfleet uniform, right?
Yeah.
I saw that as we were getting ready for this episode. I was really surprised.
Yeah. Well, the little short, curly-haired lady in the front row, in the tan 2-piece uniform, is Mrs. Robert Wise. So the Vulcan standing next to her is our friend Joanne. And I am not in the front row. Most people think that Mrs. Robert Wise was me, and no, it isn't. Because I realized the real extras need a lot of face time, right? They needed more than I did. I'm just there, for the fun of it. And so each time that they shifted, everybody would shift forward when they could. And so I'm about halfway back. I'm in a white uniform, and you can just barely see me. And
She's beside and just behind two very tall extras.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, yes.
You have to know where to look to find her in that picture.
So, but it was, it was fun, and it was an amazing experience to do. And of course, a whole bunch of fans framed their check when they got it, which, of course, screwed up Paramount's account at no end. They kept getting letters saying, check, cash the check. Just make a copy of it and cash the actual check. No, not interested. Nowadays, of course, they could keep the check because you can photograph the check and send it in, but
Yeah, exactly. Gosh,
Oh, yeah.
what an experience.
Yeah. And
That sounds like a great experience.
So far, we've been on at least every set except Star Trek Beyond and Star Trek. What was the one with Cumberbatch in it? I can't even remember its name, but it was not a good movie anyway. It was a good movie. It wasn't a good Trek movie. And of course, the new one is being filmed in Toronto. So not likely that we'll see that set either. So darn it. But it's been fun, and we've had, again, we've made a lot of friends among the crafts people, and the whom I consider them as important as any actor.
Costuming people and set people and so on.
They without them, the actors should be standing there in their skivvies with no
lines to read.
No lines to read, no ship, no props, no nothing. And, people kind of forget that all of these people in back of the actors are what make the movie or the TV episode.
That's right.
If there are a cast of, say, 50 or so, there's at least 4 times that many making it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't go forward with just the actors.
Nope.
Yeah. But people idolize the actors who are the personalities that they see, and they're the ones that go to the convention. And at Las Vegas, in the autograph room, we sat next to Ronald Moore, not the scriptwriter, Ronald D. Moore, who was two Ronald Moores, who would figure, who was one of the effects people. Of course, in those days, it still is. It was all on computer now, and it turns out he was, of course, signing autographs too. But he also had some of his music, and he and several other Star Trek people have a jazz band, and they've done some. They've done some couple of CDs, and one of them is our Star Trek song. So we should get that up. We should. And by the way, he's a very interesting person to talk to. He's done, of course, many other shows besides Star Trek, and but he's delightful, got a great sense of humor, and you guys should get him on the show.
Definitely, I appreciate that. Well, let me ask you before we wrap up here. The two of you are forever tied with the story of Star Trek. I mean, thinking about everything that Star Trek has become, is there anything that either of you would like to add?
I think that we're just going to view with interest to see just how far this game goes now at this point, and see all of the new and wonderful things. I know that a whole bunch of fans are really upset that Star Trek Discovery, however it turns out, isn't like the old Trek and isn't following true canon. Guess what, folks? It's 50 years. Everybody grows up. Everybody changes.
I mean, Abrams did a brilliant thing. He came up with an alternate dimension for Star Trek to be in. So it frees it up from a lot of the confines of the old show.
No. I mean, the fans were screaming, well, Uhura never kissed Spock. Not in our timeline.
Right.
Right. Right.
Broaden your horizons, kiddos. there may be other alternative timelines, and if there are, yay. I don't know about anybody else, but we're kind of tickled about that.
Oh, I am too.
And we don't.
We kind of agree.
Yeah, and we don't really plan to sit back in our rocking chairs and complain about that younger generation. We're very pleased to see what the younger generation is doing. They can't create any more mistakes than we did, than our generation did.
They just can create them faster, maybe.
Well, yes, indeed. That is very true. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't feel that there's a cause and effect. That if you do something or say something bad, that people there's going to be repercussions. There really is.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's not get off on that. But really, when you come right down to it, it's still going to be Star Trek. And what we saw of the costumes tells us they're really trying to move us into an amazing future. And we kind of like that. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but
Star Trek has had a really positive effect on our culture, and I think that's going to continue.
Yeah. I mean, Gene was delighted to get letters from people saying that Star Trek told them they needed to go into some kind of space studies, some kind of medicine, something that would make the world better. And he was delighted with letters like that. And I suspect that Star Trek is still getting those letters. And we're not privy to them anymore, but really, and for a while we answered Star Trek fan mail. After the Save Star Trek campaign, John, we were jobless, both of us, and it was so
we did actually get some money directly from Star Trek. Gene hired us to do fan mail for a couple of years.
And we also set up Lincoln Enterprises for him because he knew he wanted to sell goodies, but he had no idea how to do it by mail. And we did. We'd already run a couple of little mail order businesses. We just didn't have enough money to keep it going correctly. And answering Star Trek fan mail, by the way, was a hoot. You just never knew what you were going to, I always loved the ones which started out, I'm a happily married woman, but because first, yeah, I know. Your first reaction is, who asked? And, and the second one is, really? Now what do we get? And of course it was always a sexy question about Kirk, Spock, McCoy, anybody. It didn't really matter.
Oh, jeez.
Women would say, I could warm up that
cold Vulcan. It's like, I don't know. Really? We didn't even know this information. And of course, one of our favorite letters was from a young man about 9 years old, and he said, "I'd like a working phaser, please." And by the way, if my brother asks for one, don't send it to him.
I admit it. I think that was me.
Oh yeah. Well, that one has been picked up by everybody who's written about anything about Star Trek and they claim it as their own. But we're the ones who opened that letter. So
that's great.
But,
every once in a while, we'd be able to stick it to somebody too. This lady wrote in about the she thought it was wonderful that you had this whole varied cast. The Japanese helmsman and the Russian navigator, and there was another thing like that. But that woman did not belong on the bridge.
It turned out to be Uhura.
Yeah. So we put another that picture of Michelle.
Never heard from her again.
Oh, wow.
And by the way, Michelle, who used to be a cabaret singer, she wanted all of the military address letters that were sent in, because she would send them not only a picture of Uhura, but she would send them a picture of her in a far more revealing costume
In her cabaret.
in her cabaret outfit. So
Wow, really?
I think she was, I think she was doing her part to cheer up the troops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's a lot of fun. Every time she sees John, she claims that he's the handsomest, sexiest man in the world. And, even though she may be standing there amongst some really, like tall, dark, and handsome guys, and no, John is it. So I have to say, unhand
That's
my
great.
husband, woman. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, things like that, just, we just love her. But
That's
and
wonderful.
she's still going around. Yeah. So that's
Well,
wonderful.
John and Bjo, thank you very much for your time. It means so
you're
much that
welcome.
you took time out of your day to talk with us, and we
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
He was the showrunner on Star Trek in its 3rd season.
Next week, we tell you about executive producer Fred Freiberger.
Thanks for listening to 70s Trek, an independent fan production. Join us next week as we explore more about the production, the actors, the producers, and the influencers of Star Trek in the lost decade of the 1970s on 70s Trek.